Well, hi and welcome to my beautiful office. Today's subject is the R6. Yes, I have one. I sold my drone and a few other camera accessories, and this came on special and I dived in and grabbed it. So I've researched this a lot ever since it was first mentioned, and the things that concern me, because it's such a new camera, would my old lenses work on it? Would the CF cards that are in my XF400 work alright as well? And would the old batteries of the 5D Mark II and the 7D Mark II that I have work in here alright as well? Right, so we'll start with the lenses, and I'm happy to say that my 8-year-old 70 to 300mm L lens works fine. I get 12 frames per second, I get 20 frames per second. I'm not coming up against any focusing issues at all. It's working beautiful. So what Canon have added on the screen is, for high frame rates, is a H that lights up when the lens is compatible. So it'll go green. I'm getting green with this lens. If it's not compatible, it'll flash at you. Right, so that works beautifully. I've got no issues, and I'm a very, very happy man. My other lens, which is a 9-year-old lens that I bought with the 5D Mark II, so it's 10-year-old technology, it works fine as well, but it does flash with the higher frame rate, which I wouldn't be using it anyway for that. So it's not happy being in that mode, but the other modes it's fine. So a good utility lens for landscaping, filming myself maybe as well, taking photographs of people, so portraiture and all that sort of stuff. So these will work for me for now until I can afford those highly expensive RF lenses. Now the CF cards that I have in my XF400, they have a pretty high read and write speed, which the XF400 calls for. But I would just utilise what I've got. Hopefully it'll work alright and have a reasonable buffer. And yes, they work fine in here. I'll put the details up here of what the card is. So at the minute, happy with those cards, and yeah, there's no issues there at all. Now, batteries in this, they're a little bit more higher energy batteries than the ones that are in the 5D Mark II and the 7D Mark II. But I thought I'd give them a go while I was waiting for this battery, when it first turned up, to charge up, because I'd waited an hour and it was still charging. I thought I'd grab one of my old batteries and throw it in. And again, everything's working fine. It's not running out of power with that high frame rate, 20 frames per second. Not an issue at all. So I only took it down to 40% before I finished up. Came home after having a little bit of my first play with it. So if we run it down further, maybe it probably definitely would start playing up, not having enough power, because I have heard that the battery that comes with the R6, once you get down to about 30%, there's a noticeable difference with the buffer and that. And when I put my thumb on the back here to do back button focusing on the 7D Mark II, my thumb would naturally go onto the star button. So I had that set up with both active, because the likelihood of me going to that button was pretty high. So I'm used to using 2 focus buttons to help me out. So I went to configure these two the same, but I found that there's so much customization now that Canon have given us with the buttons and the dials. We can set these buttons at the back here to whatever we want. So no limit to what we can put them to. So I saw that there was eye detect on there, so I've put the star button to eye detect, because when I work in a forest environment, I know that letting the camera do the work isn't going to work very well at all. They don't understand what you're after. With the eye detect, with an animal there, a bird or something like that, it's got a small eye, it may not pick it up. So it's a pretty tough environment for a focusing system. So having my AF button assigned to 1 point focusing, that would bring it back if I couldn't get it with the eye detect, and I could use that to quickly get my subject before it nicks off, because they're there and gone in seconds. So the following morning I shot out to a paddock I know that has 3 dams, and there's usually a lot of bird life in there, so I might be able to get a bird in flood. So when I got there, there was 15 pelicans, and they took off when they saw me, and I started firing away in the mechanical shutter at first, getting my 12 frames per second. First off working with 1 point focus to make sure I locked on the subject, and then trying the eye detect. I have the perfect environment to check out this eye detect. Lots and lots of distractions. There's a couple of bushes in front of me that are heavily in fruit. They're the kangaroo apple. And the birds that are coming around at the minute are silver eyes. So you reckon it should be able to nail the eye, you would think, because that silver ring around them is pretty obvious. But there's a massive amount of distractions here. Any camera would be confused by what it's supposed to lock onto. So using a focusing system that's thinking for itself in an environment like this, crazy to even think about it, but can it do it? Right, so it's a challenging environment with that, but it's also overcast. I can just pick out the sun a little bit in this thinly sort of high cloud. I want to test out what's the highest ISO I can go to get still keeping a clean image, but I'm also going to use the flash, give you an idea of what things look like, whether without a flash, even though it's telling me that it's a balanced image with lighting, is it still going to look crap with the feathers? And then adding a flash straight away, so you get the two together, exactly the same, a bird in exactly the same spot. Seeing what looks best. You know. This is the thing, I'd love to be able to break away from this flash, and this is going to test things out, and we'll find out whether it's going to do the job for me with the agile antechinus, which I'll be going out to see later on in the afternoon. Fingers crossed things work out there for me. But what I learned now, I'm taking it over there. So photographing those silver-eyed honeyeaters, I got some reasonable results with 2000 ISO, 3200, and I pushed it up to 4000. But there is some noise there, and there's also a little bit of milkiness coming onto the feathers, especially from 300 upwards. So I had reasonable lighting, so the images were okay. And using the flash and having one without the flash just sort of shows you the difference between the two, and a lot cleaner image when I use the flash. But as I said, I love to get away from it if I possibly can. It's something I'm forced to use if I want to get a good, fantastic image, especially of the agile antechinus. Right, so yesterday I came to this spot. We had that diffused light. It's a lot better when it's diffused here. Now let me just explain the conditions that we have. We're in the shade. So when it's diffused, we're not getting harsh patches of light and then dark areas. We're getting everything more even, especially when the light's above. That's streaming in nicely. So it's a tough environment to film in, photographing, sorry. Have my shutter speed set at 1,000th of a second to freeze the action with the Agile. They're so fast. Can't go any lower than that, or it's just becomes a blurred image. But because I'm using a zoom lens, the depth of field is extremely shallow. We're talking millimeters. So to cope with that, I have to use an aperture of 8 to 9. 9 is spot on. That gives me about 5mm depth of field. So I'm always trying to focus on the eye, and as we go to the back of the head across, be about 5mm back. So I get a really good result and I'm happy with them. But because we're shutting everything down so much with the light, 1,000ths of a second shutter speed and that high aperture, so we have to bring the ISO up, and that's when we're bringing in problems with the 7D Mark II. I would have milky looking fur at 2000 ISO. So I'm forced to use a flash, so I'm not getting that problem of having their fur looking milky looking and horrible and an unsellable image. Right, so I set myself up here yesterday. We've got this diffused light. I had the Agile coming out in quite some numbers, every now and then some coming together. I started off, because of those settings, I had to use a value of about 4,000 when they were up at the nesting box. So this is the nesting box that I built, and when they were coming out of the hole, there was enough light there that 4,000 ISO was what I could use. And as they came down, I had to go higher and higher and higher. So 8,000 was halfway down, and when they came down the bottom, I was using 10,000 to later on in the afternoon, 12,000. They're unusable. You pixel peep on them, and the fur just goes milkier and milkier. It's horrible. So 4,000's okay. 20 frames per second. Did the eye detect, keep up? No. It's struggling to see the eyes. I can see them, and I don't know why it's having a problem, but it's struggling to pick it up. When it's up higher, when there was actually a night, when it put its head into a nice bit of light, it'd pick the eye up real quick. But as soon as it starts coming down into this nice diffuse sort of light, and then into a little bit dimmer light, it just couldn't see it. So unfortunately, that's a struggle at the minute for it. I really need to use the electronic shutter to get that 20 frames per second, so I don't have blackout, because my subject bounds like a possum, and it's extremely hard to photograph them when you're doing it with mechanical, because you get the blank out, you can't follow it. So when the time comes that I can get my subject onto a beautiful stage where I get good afternoon light or morning light for quite some time, and they turn up, and I can use that electronic shutter, we will achieve gloriness. Because in the past, getting an action shot of them in the air, I fluked it twice, because I had a spot where I was in full sunlight with the 7D Mark II, and try as I could black out, I couldn't keep up with it. Well, it's been overcast the last 3 days, very dark and dim where the Agile anti-kindness are. So it's been a little frustrating. I really wanted to get on with practicing with that 20 frames per second, try and get them bounding in the air, get some action shots. Can't use a flash with that, of course, because you only get 3 shots, and then the flash has got to regenerate again. So yeah, it's just an impossibility. We need lots and lots of light in here for it to work. So I had an epiphany yesterday, and I thought, let's bring my studio light out and see whether I can get it up close enough and the Agile won't be too worried about it. Put that on, it's pretty strong light. So yesterday I did that, and they teased me. They started coming out of the hole of the nesting box, had a look at me, and then went back to bed. But I've come back today, straight away. I'm getting action. I'm actually getting some practice in with these 20 frames per second. And because there's a lot of light from my studio light on the stage that I have, the eye detect is working pretty good, but not enough to capture it when it starts to move away. Need more light. If I had another one of these, I'd be in heaven. I'd be getting those beautiful shots. Yeah, so it's not staying on it consistently enough. I've got close to some nice stuff, but yeah, there's a couple of times it's just dropped off at the wrong moment, and you know, in some nice poses. So we're getting closer, we're getting some practice and starting to understand what's going on. With lots of light, I'm going to get some really good, amazing bounding shots of them in the air. Yeah, so we're getting closer to getting these glorious shots. I'm really starting to understand this focusing system and how it works in a forest environment. In the ISO too, being able to go up to 4000 ISO, that's double what I could use with the 7D Mark II without a flash. Game changer. Now the image does need a bit of work in post, which I'll work on in the future, but it's getting me away from that flash. I can now use 20 frames per second. As long as there's good light on there, it'll get the eye and we'll get something. So we're well underway here, really excited for the future. Alright, what's my favourite part of the R6? Well, it's the Viewfinder, the EVF. It's just been amazing. It's so clear, bright, easy to see everything. We have the same functionality that we have on the monitor, so we can scroll through all the menu and change the camera settings. We also can look at our images, we can review them in the Viewfinder. So that's a huge thing for me, because every now and then, like today, I forget my reading glasses. So I look at the back of the screen, it's all blurry, I can't see, but having a very clear and crisp Viewfinder just changes the game for me. It's just awesome. I'm not worrying about whether I got glasses with me or not, but also I'm finding it much better to use and more convenient to use than pulling the glasses out of my pocket. I'm not worrying anymore. So there's far too much to talk about in this video about the focusing system and what I've learnt and how I've got the camera configured with cases and all those sort of things, and my thoughts on the video capabilities of the camera too. I'll make another video in the coming weeks. I'd like to thank those that have been donating to my documentary with Buy Me a Coffee, and I'll leave the link to buy me a coffee down in the description part of this video, so down there, down below this video. And at the end of the video I will put a link to a video that I made on what I'm doing with this documentary, all about it, and all about Buy Me a Coffee as well. And I'd like to thank those that have recently, there's 2 new people have donated to the cause and are now part of this documentary, so I've put you up on my honours board there, so thank you very much. So I've managed to raise $210 so far, so we're underway, but we need some more to really make sure this documentary is awesome and gets done really quickly. So if you can be bothered to help me out and have a bit of faith in me that I'll make a beautiful video, simply buy me a coffee. Alright, if you'd like to subscribe to my channel and get more of this amazing stuff, click on my pretty little face just down there in the bottom right hand corner of the screen. Hit the little bell, you'll get notification whenever I do anything else. And if you'd like to go and have a look at all the mad and crazy things I've been doing in the past, click on my icon right here at the end of this video. It'll take you to my channel. Oh man, I go on adventures, I take you with me. I talk about photographing and filming in a forest environment, get new cameras, I talk about them, give you my honest opinion on them. So go and have a browse, there's tons of stuff there. There'll be something there of interest to you, I am sure. Now, just remember, if you don't do, you don't get. So get out there and start photographing and filming wildlife. Stay away from that coronavirus stuff, and I'll catch you on the next one. Oh, got Giles out again. See ya.